Good morning, everybody. So today is the last in the series of 3 solemnities or great feast days that have to do with the core of our faith as Christians, biblical Christians, and as Catholics. And today is the solemnity of Corpus Christi, the body and blood of the Lord. Now, I will have to be honest with you. The dogma or the belief, our belief on the Eucharist and the body and blood of the Lord will be close to impossible for us to understand if we don't factor in history. So there are several layers of the historical that we need to go back to in time, in memory, in our in the mind and in our heart, so that we can fathom the mystical. So from the historical to the mystical. So allow me to trace some of the major events in history that are important for you to have a minimum level of appreciation for the solemnity of the body and blood of the Lord. One historical fact. The Lord came, created Adam and Eve, created human beings, and infused in them, in each one of us, an immortal soul through His direct creative act, and then established a covenant. And the first historical covenant was established with Noah. And the Lord said, no more flood waters next time, but you will have to shape up. But then, of course, we know the history in Scripture that after learning the lessons that Noah learned, all his descendants forgot about it and went back to their merry ways. So again, he made a covenant with Abraham. That is the second historical covenant that you can read in the Old Testament. But then you know very well that the sons of Abraham, like you and I, forget all too easily. And so we renege on our promises. And so God made another historical covenant with Moses. And this is now getting closer to my point, because the first reading has a reference to that. When Moses took the blood of the sacrificed lambs and animals and took half and sprinkled it on the people, and the other half he sprinkled on the altar of sacrifice. Now we're getting close. The covenant established by God through Moses is now pointing directly at the concept of food, the sacrificed animal, and then the gospel now makes us even closer. The context of the institution of the Eucharist happened or is connected historically and mystically with the feast of the Passover. So today in the Gospel of Mark, we hear on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, yung tinapay na walang paalsa, walang lebadura. Bakit ho? Basahin niyo ang lumang tipan. Nagmamadali ho sila. They had no time to make the dough rise. They had to prepare food in a fast food. They had to prepare food in a jiffy because they were all in a hurry to escape from Egypt. And therefore that bread had to be baked without waiting for it to rise. So they didn't have time to put yeast, yung lebadura, yung nagpapaalsa, lebar, nagpapaalsa. So, ito po ang kapistahan ng tinapay na walang lebadura. Kung kailan sinasakripisyo ayon sa kasaysayan na ginanap sa kasunduan ng Diyos at ni Moises, na nagmamadali silang tumakas sa Ehipto kung kaya't walang panahon. So they had to have a quick meal on the night they were going to pass over from slavery to new life towards the promised land. So the institution of the Eucharist definitely has historical underpinnings. So if you don't look at the many layers of history in the Old Testament, there is no point about us celebrating the Mass. And then there are other things now that border on the mystical. And so one particular element of this historical molding and getting a segue into the mystical is this. The Lord, while they were eating, He took bread, said a blessing, the blessing that we do during the offertory. Blessed are you, Lord God of all creation. This is all Old Testament wordings coming from the very, very words that are used in the feast of the Passover. Broke it, gave it to them, and said, and this is now the mystical. He didn't say, this is the symbol of my body. No. He said, take it, this is my body. Why does he talk about the body? Because the body of the animal sacrifice in the Old Testament had to be immolated, had to be sacrificed, had to be offered, and had to be consumed. They had to consume everything in a hurry because presumably while they were on their journey towards out of Egypt towards the Promised Land, they didn't know when would be their next meal. It was the food of journeyers. It was the food of wayfarers. It was the food of people on the march. It was the food of people who were told to go and follow Moses, my appointed leader, your leader that will lead you towards from slavery towards freedom, the glorious liberty of the children of God. And so the second element, then he took a cup, gave thanks and gave it to them, and they all drank from it. And he said to them, he didn't say, this is the symbol of my blood. No, he was straightforward and precise. This is the blood of the covenant which will be shed for many. Will be shed because right after that Passover meal, the Last Supper, in less than 24 hours, he would be shedding his blood, no longer on the altar of bloody sacrifice, but on the altar of Calvary, which was also bloody because he shed his blood on the altar that was Calvary. Now, I will have to veer away from this history and go into the mystical. Veer away from the historical so that we can appreciate the mystical. And I start by leading your attention to the altar now. This altar now is the altar of unbloody sacrifice. Why? Because we don't repeat the sacrifice of Calvary. The sacrifice of the Lord that was done once and for all time cannot be repeated. I'm not worthy to repeat that sacrifice. No one of you is worthy, not even the Pope. Only the Son of God became man. Only the Son of God who took on human flesh is worthy to offer that bloody sacrifice for all time, once and for all. And therefore, during the Eucharistic celebration, we don't repeat that sacrifice. No one is worthy to do that. Not any one of you and me, no one of us. But then, what do? This is a memorial. Do this in memory of me. And this is where now the mystical again comes in. In biblical terminology, memorial is not just a commemoration. It is not just recalling the day you were born. It is not a birthday celebration. A memorial is a making present of some mysterious thing, and mystery doesn't mean it is not understandable. Mystery means it is something that is so sacred that may escape the full understanding of humanity, but that doesn't mean it is illogical, and that is impossible. Because with God, nothing is impossible. So what do? In this unbloody sacrifice that is the Holy Eucharist, what do? We take part we participate ritually in that one bloody sacrifice done by no less than the Son of God. And our ritual participation means that we must take and eat. We must take and drink. And now this is the theological meaning of what I said a few months ago that brought me into trouble. Somebody got very angry with me because he said I was not giving importance to the online Mass. I didn't say anything like that. I'm just telling you that since this is a ritual enactment of that sacrifice that was done on Calvary, that has historical underpinnings from the Old Testament, from Noah, Abraham, David, Moses, and then Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who offered His body and blood on that one sacrifice up on Calvary, the altar of Calvary. We are doing a ritual enactment of that, where we take part actively, consciously, and fully. Which means you cannot do that if you're just watching a TV or your computer screen. I didn't say it's useless. I won't say that. Why? Because God's grace is channeled through every possible means. God's grace is not bound by time and place. God's grace can be received by anybody, even if you're not taking part in this Mass. But the full participation and the full effects can be had only when you come here, you take and eat, you take and drink. And I will have to give you another important detail. If you look at the altar, that altar has beside it a big crucifix. In Catholic liturgy, you cannot celebrate Mass without a crucifix. And I said, il Crucifisso, hindi lang yung krus. That's Protestant. Why? Because the cross alone by itself is a symbol of a painful, ignominious death. But the crucified one, with the body, with the corpus, the crucified Lord, gives the full meaning of what it means to offer that perfect sacrifice that can only be, it alone can be the perfect acceptable sacrifice to the Father. And therefore, every time we celebrate Mass, we must have il Crucifisso, the crucified Lord. And why is it that there is another smaller one in front of the priest? Because the priest has to keep it always in front of his eyes so that he gets reminded, Oy, Father, hindi ko ang bida rito, ha? Kaya, marami na yung mga narcissist, pati mga pare narcissist. Akala nila sila ang bida. Hindi ka ang bida rito. Ang bida rito ay yung nasa krus. And that is why Mass should never be entertainment. Why? It is a sacrifice. If you're looking for a Mass to be entertained, then you go to a bar. If you're looking for a priest who sings every time and entertains you, then you should go to a concert. The Mass is not an entertainment, it is a sacrifice. You take part in it. You are part of it, bodily, spiritually. And you cannot take part fully, bodily, and perfectly if through no fault of our own, we cannot come to church because of the pandemic. And therefore, the next best thing you can do is to spiritually join a sacrifice, a Eucharistic sacrifice, going on in a consecrated church with a consecrated altar. The living sacrifice takes on in a moment of time, but the effects of that sacrifice is nowhere equal, nowhere near the timeless effects of that one sacrifice that God has offered for all time in Calvary. So my dear friends, bakit nandiyan ang krusipiho? Because hindi ho kami ang bida rito. Kahit gaano pa-cute ang pare, hindi siya ang bida. Kahit gaano siya kapogi, hindi siya ang bida. Kahit gaano siya kagaling magsalita, Father, hindi ikaw ang bida. Ang bida ay ang nagaganap sa altar. Therefore, if you go around, shopping around for churches, ay doon ako sa Quiapo. Bata pa yung pare. Ay doon ako sa galing galing magpatawa. Ay, doon ako sa kabila, ang galing kumanta. Then you're not at Mass, you are in an entertainment hall. My dear brothers and sisters, now I go to certain important things. When you are part of a covenant, you just don't receive, you give. A covenant means it is an agreement between two parties. God gives a gift of His Son. God gives His life. You take and eat. You take and receive. But what is your contribution? And this is now the big point. And when I say contribution, I'm not talking about the money that you put in the bag collection. That may be part of it, but it is not the most important. That contribution that you give is part of your complex meaning and symbolic system of taking part and real participation in the sacrifice of the Lord. So what do you have on offer? What gift can you give to the Lord today in this Mass? I'll give you some examples. There are times when I feel very discouraged. I've been a priest almost for 40 years now, 39 years. There are times when I feel so discouraged and I feel like on certain days I have no energy to do what I have been doing all my life. Helping people, organizing, depending on my work, like I've been a school administrator for many, many years. And I must tell you that there are days when I don't want to do it anymore. Why? Because no matter what you do, may galit sa'yo. No matter what you do, ikaw naghanap ng pera para sa bonus nila. Sisisihin ka pa kasi hindi yun ang inaasahan nila. Hindi galing sa school yun, hinanap ko yun. But they don't know that. You do something good and people don't give a heck, don't care a fig about what you do. Now, hindi po ako ang bida. Si Kristo po ang bida rito. So I invite you and ask you, honestly, ano po ang inyong contribution sa sakripisyong ito? When you can answer that before you leave this church after this Mass, then you have celebrated Eucharist with God, for God, in His honor, for His glory, for His sake, not for me. I have to ask myself, what is my contribution? That is between me and my God. Yours is between you and the God you believe in.